What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. In this video we're going to be talking about 5 steps to go ahead and get started flipping houses. So if you're new here, make sure you go ahead and subscribe and go ahead and like this video and turn on your notifications so you can get alerts whenever I release new videos. So the first step to getting started flipping houses is going to be to finding a good deal. So there's tons of ways that you can do this. I'm not really going to cover this in this video because it could be a whole entire video in and of itself, but essentially what's going to come down to is the numbers. So what numbers are important and what numbers you need to look at to make sure you're getting a good deal. So there's a lot of little nitty-gritty numbers that I actually covered it in the first video that I posted a couple weeks ago. The numbers that you really need to look at are going to be your after repair value, your repair costs, your money costs, your holding costs, what it costs you to hold the property, things like your taxes, insurance, utilities. You also need to know what your realtor costs are going to be when you sell the property. You also need to know your closing costs, which will be the closing costs to purchase it and the closing costs when you sell it. And you're also going to need to know what the minimum amount of profit is that you want at the end of it. So that's one way that you can break down all the numbers to figure out if you're getting a good enough deal. That all sounds like a lot of stuff. So to kind of simplify things, what a lot of investors actually use is what's called the 70% rule. So simple math, what the 70% rule really says is that, let's say there's a property and you know the after repair value is $100,000. You need to make sure that you're buying it at 70% all in. After repair value is $100,000. We need to buy it at $70,000 minus what the repairs would be. So let's say the after repair value is $100,000 and our repairs are about $20,000. So we take $100,000, multiply that by the 70%, brings us to $70,000, track $20,000 in repairs. That would mean that we need to buy the property at $50,000 for it to be a good deal. So once you go through all that and you make sure that you're getting a good deal, you need to make sure you find the money. How are you going to get the money to go ahead and buy the property, do the renovations, and cover all the different costs? So there's really going to be about 4 different ways. There's a lot of other creative different ways you can get into this, but there's really 4 main ways that I'm going to talk about how you can fund your deal. The first one's going to be cash. So you can pay cash for everything. You can pay cash to go ahead and purchase the property, do the renovation, cover all the other little costs that you have. But if you're like me, most people, we don't have a bunch of cash sitting around to go ahead and purchase our first flip and do all that. So good news, there's other ways you can go ahead and get this done and get it funded. The next way you could really do this is going to be hard money. So hard money lenders are basically lenders that lend to real estate investors. So what they do, they charge high interest rates, usually a lot of different fees, and they're going to lend you based on the actual asset, the property, and not necessarily so much based on yourself. So they don't care too much about your credit score and your income. Although those things are important, they do want to make sure that you can make kind of the baseline monthly payments for a few months, and they also want to make sure that you have a little bit of money in reserves in case things go wrong. But they don't necessarily care about what your certain income is, and as long as you don't have, foreclosures, bankruptcies, and things like that on your credit report, they'll be okay lending to you. Some of the terms that I've seen for hard money lenders is they'll lend 90% of your purchase price, and they'll lend you 100% of the repairs. Or some lenders say that they'll lend you 70% of the total after repair value. It really just varies by the lenders, and typically they're going to be charging maybe 10 to 13% interest. They're going to charge you a few points, and what points are is essentially, a point is a percent of the total loan. So if your total loan, let's say, is $100,000 and they're charging you 2 points, that's going to equal to $2,000 that they'd also charge you. So all in all, it kind of sounds like it's a lot. So the interest rates, the points, the different fees the hard money lenders charge, but it's just something you have to factor into the deal. As long as the numbers still work out to where you're making enough money to meet your minimum profit, it's just a cost of doing business. Sometimes I hear people say they don't want to use hard money because they're charging 12% interest and it just costs too much. But you have to ask yourself, what's the cost of not doing that deal and making that $20, $30, $40, $50,000 that you could have made on that deal, so you don't want to pay 12% interest. And there's really 2 kinds of hard money lenders. There's some hard money lenders who are nationwide, and you can go ahead and look them up on Google and find some, but there's also hard money lenders who are local to you, who you can usually find also on Google and reach out to them and kind of figure out what their terms are, because it really will vary quite a bit. The next thing I'm going to talk about, which kind of isn't really the easiest thing to do a lot of times when you're starting off new, but it's private money. Private money is essentially money from friends, family, or people that you just know, you've networked with, who have some money sitting around. It could be cash that they have, or maybe money they have in their retirement accounts that they're able to lend to you, and they get a return on that in interest. This works really well a lot of times for people who, like I said, have retirement accounts and they don't necessarily want their money sitting in the stock market. It works well also for high paid professionals like doctors, lawyers, engineers, things like that, who might make a high income and want somewhere to put the money they have. Also, there's a lot of regular everyday people who maybe don't make a ton of money, but they've saved money and they have a nice little nest egg, and it's money that they want to put to work somewhere. So you can do this, and just like if you were borrowing money from a Bank of America or a Wells Fargo or a big bank out there, give them the same documents, notes, the deed of trust or mortgage, and all those different things, and have them get a mortgage against their property. This is something that I recommend you speak with an attorney before doing something like this, because there are guidelines on how you can raise money and what's allowed and not allowed, and also about the different documents to protect both you and your lender. I'm not an attorney, so I'm only speaking about my experience and what I've done. But private money can be great because it allows that individual to be able to invest their money and get a good return on it, and it's backed by real estate, so it's a pretty secure, you can't really say guaranteed, but it's pretty much a guaranteed return that they'll be getting on their money. And the fourth way that you can actually get into flipping is going to be by joint venturing. So I think this is going to be one of the best ways that you can actually get into flipping. So when you get into real estate and when you get into flipping houses, there's going to be a lot of things that you don't know or a lot of things you're not aware of. So if you can kind of joint venture with someone, even if you are giving them 50% or whatever the cut is that you guys kind of agree to, if you are giving them a big chunk of the profits, it's going to help protect you from your downside and losing money. And also you're going to be making money at the same time off the deal. So if you think about what most people do when they're going to college, most people are going to be paying money and they're not making anything. If you get a deal when you're joint venturing with someone, you're making money and you're getting that education, you're getting that knowledge that you can then use in the future deals. So once you found a good deal and you found the money for it, the next thing you're going to need to do is go ahead and close on the property and then manage the construction and renovations. So you're going to need to find good, reputable contractors to handle any renovations that need to be done with the property. So there's kind of different contractors that are out there. There's more handymen, people who are typically unlicensed, and then you have licensed contractors who typically are going to cost a little bit more money. And then you also have your general contractors and your subcontractors. A general contractor is going to be someone who's managing a team of different people and has, people who can do flooring, they can do the tile work, they can do roofing, they might have an electrician who works under them, different things like that, and they can kind of manage the whole job for you. Or you can kind of find subcontractors yourself, and then you can find the person that's going to handle the flooring, the person that's going to handle the paint, whoever's going to be doing the roof. You can find the electrician yourself, the plumber yourself. You can find all those individual trades yourself and then manage them and put them all together. That typically is going to be the cheaper route, but as you can tell, it's probably going to take you a lot more time to kind of manage and put together those pieces. Another thing to consider is going to be, depending on your city and what municipality you're in, you might need to pull permits for certain things. So here in San Antonio, where I am, we need to pull permits whenever we're doing major mechanical things, like if we're doing electrical work, if we're doing plumbing work, if we're putting a new roof on, replacing an HVAC. And we also need to get a permit pulled if we're going to be replacing windows, installing new doors, things like that. We also need to get permits for. So it's something you can really just reach out to your city's development services department, and you can kind of ask them and figure out which things you actually need to get permits for. And again, I know here in San Antonio, they're pretty strict on this stuff. They actually have a strike team that goes around and they look to see if people are doing renovations and things like that without a permit. And if they catch you doing that, it can be a real pain. A lot of other cities are a lot more loose with things. So as long as you're not doing anything major, if you're simply just, putting in new outlets and switches and light fixtures, things like that, replacing toilets, they really don't care for permits. But here in San Antonio, they're a lot more strict with it. So it's something that I just make sure we get licensed people to do all that stuff. Another huge thing that you want to make sure you consider is that you don't do the different steps in a renovation the wrong way. So for instance, there's been some times where I bought houses where the roof's leaking and maybe the whole interior needs to be renovated. You don't want to start repainting the house and fixing things on the inside really if you have a roof leak, because if there's one day where it starts to rain, a lot of the work you might have done on the inside just completely gets messed up because you haven't fixed that roof leak. Another example would be if you start off with, let's say, the flooring. So if you start putting carpet and laminate floors down, then you're going to have your contractors walking all over those nice new floors you put in while the job's still being done and they're working on other things around the house. So something like that, you'd want to make sure you wait towards later in the end of the project, and then you can go ahead and get those put in there. And also a lot of the mechanical things, like I said, like your plumbing and electrical stuff, every now and then they do have to maybe cut open some sheetrock, get behind the walls a little bit. So that's stuff that you do want to make sure to usually get done earlier on in a project to make sure that you're not kind of doing work twice. So you don't want to paint stuff over and fix a bunch of sheetrock and then have them come back and just cut it open. So things like that, you kind of just need to think ahead of time and figure out what things need to be done in the house and lay them out in the correct order, so that way you're working in the right order. So number 4, once you get all your construction and renovations done, you're going to need to go ahead and list the property. I highly recommend using a realtor, putting the property on the market and listing it, and not trying to sell it for sale by owner. You will save your commissions Typically here in San Antonio, people are paying about 6%. So 3% to the listing agent, 3% to the buyer's agent. So if I was to sell my properties for sale by owner, I wouldn't have to pay any commissions at all. But you get a lot less exposure when you sell your property for sale by owner. So it really just makes the most sense to go ahead and put your property on the market and use a realtor who knows what they're doing. Find a realtor, and once you have a realtor, another thing that I highly recommend doing is getting professional pictures taken of the property. Professional pictures typically cost me about $100 to do, and it makes a huge difference. So just like you'll get more exposure for your property by having it on the MLS, you'll get a ton more eyeballs if you have professional pictures of that house. It'll bring a lot more traffic in there, and a lot more people are going to want to come see your house, which is going to get you more offers and higher offers. So number 5 is going to be accepting the offer. So you want to make sure that you accept the best offer for your property, and the best offer isn't always just about the price. There's a lot of other things that you also want to consider. For instance, you want to consider maybe what kind of financing you're using. For those of you that don't know, a lot of buyers like to use FHA financing, where a buyer can just put down 3.5% and they can get into the property. However, when we're flipping houses, sometimes you run into an issue where we turn around and sell the property so quickly. With FHA financing, the buyers actually can't buy that property if we haven't owned it for 90 days. So you want to make sure you're not accepting an offer within that 90-day period. That's an FHA buyer, because then after a couple weeks, you'll find out that you aren't able to close. So there's a lot of different things that you need to consider when looking at the best offer, and it's not just about the price. So once you do accept an offer, pretty much every single buyer out there is going to ask for an inspection, or here in Texas, we call it the option period. So during that period, what the buyers want to do is go ahead and have an inspection done on the property, and during that period, they also have the ability to say, no, we don't want this property, or they can also come back and renegotiate with you and ask you to take care of a couple different things. And I'll say this, pretty much every single property that I've ever worked with, the buyers always ask for something to be done. So just expect it, it's part of the process, and typically if it's not going to cost you a lot of money, it just makes the most sense to go ahead and get those things done, to go ahead and get the deal done. After you get the inspection done and you go through those renegotiations, if there are any, what's going to happen next is if the buyer was using a loan to buy the property, their lender is going to send out an appraiser. So what the appraiser is really going to be doing is coming to look at the property, looking at the condition of it. They typically also measure the property, make sure that it is the size that it says it is. And what they're looking to do is really figure out what the value is of the place. So they want to look at it, see the condition, and then they're going to look and see comparable homes to justify the value and the sales price of it. So what I like to do, and what I recommend you doing as well, to make sure that you don't have any issues with the appraisal, is leaving a list of any repairs or renovations that you did on the counter there in the house, and also leaving any kind of comps. So comps are short for comparables. You want to go ahead and get some comparable sales from your realtor, and then you can go ahead and leave those there as well. So that way it's nice and easy for the appraiser to see, hey, this house has, these 5 other properties that sold for this amount, and we also did all these different renovations, so that justifies the price that we're selling it at. That's a huge thing I recommend doing. I've rarely ever had issues with appraisals, and I think that's the reason why. And typically, once the appraisal is done and the property appraises for the amount that you need it to, pretty much good to go. So from there, you really just need to show up to closing and either get a check or wire, and you're done. You completed your first deal. So I hope that helps out for anyone who's looking to start flipping houses and get your first deal done. If y'all have any other questions about how to get your first deal done, or maybe any certain parts of this that I glossed over a little bit, I can always make follow-up videos or maybe explain a certain topic more in depth. And also, if you have any other questions too about real estate, or questions about some deals that I've done, let me know as well. Or maybe even the first deal that I ever did, or the first flip, I can maybe make a video about those too. Just let me know, and go ahead and leave a like on this video and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.